And that was, my trigger to say, hey, you confess up the truth now. To which he did not. So as a Mercedes guy, we are kind of the go-to when you're looking for a car, which ones to buy, which ones not to buy, because we work on them and we see the bad side of them, of what breaks and how expensive it is and how difficult it is and so forth. But what I've decided is the best SUV that Mercedes ever made is the GLK. So this came out in 2010 and ran to 2015. It was the small SUV, their first foray into the small SUV market, based on the 204 chassis C-Class, which is the C-Class that ran from 2008 to 2014. So it's just an oversized C-Class, essentially. But that also makes it one of the best cars because there's no fancy suspension, there's no fancy brakes or any of that. It's just normal car stuff. The worst thing about them is maybe the 4MATIC because they have the front drive shafts that blow up. Because I like them so much and they're easy to sell. And actually, if you look relative to their SUV stablemates, the ML and the GL, they hold a better value because they're like, say, a 10-year-old GLK and a 10-year-old ML or GL are the same price, even though the MSRP was much lower on a GLK. So we like them. They're great first cars. They're great only cars. They do everything well. So I like to buy them. This was before I got my dealer license and I was scouring Facebook and so forth. Found this GLK. It was a pre-facelift model. And it was white with a black interior. And I think it had just under 100,000 miles or 90 or so. So this being, I think, 2022 at the time, was a great low mileage car. And then being white with a black interior is preferred because most of them were the tan and it just gets dirty and wears out and it just doesn't look as good. So this one was on Facebook having a transmission issue. And again, going back to knowing these cars, we know that was a pretty rare failure. It's usually going to be a torque converter shutter or a conductor plate, one of those two things. So this one was 2 hours away, and running the shop and stuff, it's tough for me to get away and make sense of leaving the shop for that amount of time to go buy what may be a $5,000-$6,000 car. So I do some shrewd negotiation, and I meet him smack dab in the middle, and I send him some money and say I'll send a tow truck to pick it up. So we do that. It shows up later that day. All's looking good. And part of this deal was that he didn't have the title because he had a lien on it. Nothing we're not used to dealing with. You usually get like the letter of payoff or, it's the car, the money, and the title. You don't get all three. So I got the car. He got my money. But the title was the one that was up in the air. And like I said, it's not something super uncommon to deal with. A little more so on cars that don't cost a lot, but it happens. So car shows up. And we're waiting on him to get us the title. We quickly realize that this is going to be an easy fix. It's just a torque converter shutter. And usually all that entails is changing the fluid and draining the torque converter. And it is happy as can be. It's just the fluid gets old and it makes it grumpy. So we pretty much got it all fixed up, even not having the title, which is usually not very well advised to spend money on a car that you don't have the title for. But we knew it was something easy and it wasn't too big a deal. So I start following up with the guy. Say, hey, how we doing on the title? He said, I'm just waiting on it to come in the mail. I said, okay. And I think I'd asked him if he had the payoff or whatever, which he kind of danced around. And I'm like, it might be a little difficult for someone to send a screenshot. Not everyone's technically savvy. We waited, and I waited about another week. I said, hey, how we doing on the title? He says, oh, I got it. I put it in the mail. And I kind of thought about it for a second. And I'm like, well, he's only a couple hours away. So this really couldn't have taken very long within the same state. So I said, hey, do you have a tracking number or anything like that? I hadn't seen anything. He said, oh, I'll have to find it. I think the receipt was in my truck. All that dancing around is usually a sign that something is not going to go in the way you hope. So I kind of waited and, I said, worst case, I can get a bonded title. But this guy I know had this car. So I waited a few more days and said, hey, what's going on with the title? Have you heard anything? He says, oh, man, that's awful. He says, I'm going to have to go to the post office, but, I'm out of town or whatever the excuse was that day. A couple more days go by, and I'm like, hey, man, what's going on with this title? This is getting out of hand. He's like, oh, it must have been, lost. I know it's coming. It's in the mail. I went to the post office. I confirmed it. And I asked again. I said, is there a tracking number? Is there something I can use to see that what you're saying is true? And, of course, he didn't have that. So I went to the next best thing. I called one of my old finance buddies at the dealer, and I asked her, I said, hey, can you run this VIN and see what's going on with this? So she did, and it did come back in his name, which was a good thing to see, but we did see that it still had an electronic lien on it. So he actually, in fact, hadn't paid off this car yet, which, I get it. Some people are struggling with money. I've been there for sure. So I wasn't mad about that. So I actually messaged the guy, and I said, hey, I looked this up and it shows that the car isn't paid off. And that was, my trigger to say, hey, you confess up the truth now. To which he did not. He said, oh, it's paid off. It's in the mail. I don't know why it would say that. And I think I ended up texting him back and I said, it's fine. Just tell me the truth. Like, I'm not going to be mad. You can say, hey, I needed a few extra weeks to pay it off, because I think he was underwater on it. So he had to come up with even extra money from what I paid him. So that made the whole situation more difficult. So I would have understood that if he had just said something. But again, he just brushed it off. And so we waited a few more days, still didn't hear anything. I just kept checking the registration on the car. And one day I saw lien released. And I was, oh man, that's super exciting. So maybe it's actually coming. So diligently, I was just checking the mailbox every day, hoping that I didn't just lose, I think it was $6,000 or $7,000 on this car by not having a title and have to go through all the headache of bonded titles and so forth. But one day I went out to the mailbox and sure enough, it was a handwritten envelope with my name on it, with his name on the front. And yes, it had the title in it. But the next thing was the post office has this wonderful thing called timestamps. And you could see on the letter that he had just sent it like a day before. Whereas all these weeks of him saying, oh, it was in the mail, it's in the mail, it's in the mail. I guess he didn't really think that through, that the letter would have a date on it from when he sent it. But we let that go. I had my title, I had my car, he had his money, and everything worked out in the end. So even though I ended up with, $7-8 in this car and a lot of headaches and a lot of weeks, we ended up selling the car for, I think, just over $12,000. So a nice profit margin, knowing that we didn't have to spend a lot of money on this car and not a lot of money to fix it. So that's kind of one of the good things about these is that between, wholesale values and retail is a pretty good spread, knowing that these don't have any major issues. Even though they do sound terrible that you've got this major transmission defect, that having that knowledge and expertise, you're able to know what you're going to run into, and it all ended up working out.
Right now, we've got the greatest offer we've ever had from Avalon King. Their AS9 DIY ceramic coating is now just $59.99. That's $20 off. And for the first 100 people today to click the link in the description below, they're going to get a free bottle of the Armor Shield Light, a $34.99 value included. Now, what we love about this is that it has the same hydrophobic properties that we love about the ceramic coating, but it's so much easier to work with and use whenever you need just a spot or whatever cleaning up, like you would a quick detail in the Armor Shield Light. And if your car is already coated, this will sort of energize and rejuvenate the coating to make it perform even better. So check them out now at the link in the description below to get yours today.